interrogation or torture took place.
Right.
And he examined me.
Right.
The second time I was taken to a different district surgeon in Vereniging.
I see.
And it was to him that I had told him that my ears was buzzing.
Right.
And he gave me some tablets.
Which consequently did not work.
It
But
didn't.
I'm asking, at any given time, where were the police officers when you made the statement to the doctor?
But my memory serves me correct. In Vereniging, the police, the security policemen who took me there were present in a little cubicle
I see.
where he examined me.
Okay. In your statement that was put to you, the one that you had made in 1982, it was recorded on a police officer's statement that you were made to sleep on a camp bed. Do you recall? And you said that never happened. You were made to sleep on paper, newspaper, as well as 2 chairs. You recall that?
Yes. Well, as I indicated, they put some newspaper on the floor and I was allowed to lie down there. And then they put chairs back to back. The back portion.
To create a sort of a place to sleep.
And then there were probably 3 or I don't remember exactly how many.
Right.
And I was allowed to lie down there.
Now, during the time that you were made to lie down and on these at John Foster Square on the 10th floor, were you guarded? Were there people that were watching over you?
Yes, they were. There were policemen there all the time.
All the time.
And they didn't allow me rest for a long period, if my memory serves me correct. It was for a short period.
Now, when one looks at the whole concept of being in detention, the whole purpose of you being detained, where you are not being interrogated, is to be placed in a cell. In the cell, providing a holding cell. Is there any reason that you can think of why the police would leave you to sleep on the 10th floor?
No.
Oh, that's fine. You testified that the inquest, subsequently inquests that were held, in particular Babla Saluji and the others, was a whitewash. Why do you say that?
As I've indicated, I've been involved in the struggle for a long time, and I know of a few people who died in detention.
Yes.
And, talking to their families and all those kind of things. And we knew that the way the system worked, that, the presiding officers of the court were biased, and it was a total whitewash. And if my memory served me, I think there was something like 22 odd people who died in detention. And there wasn't a single instance where it was ruled that the security police were responsible for their death.
We know that there were more than 76 detainees that
That's correct.
died.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Naidoo, at the stage you said that when you were in Vereniging, you were told there at the police cells that we will kill you and your body will be warm and it won't be able to be picked up at a post-mortem. Do you know what the policeman meant by that?
I said they were trying to intimidate me.
Right.
They were telling me, they made me do lots of exercises.
Right.
And obviously as a result of that, I perspired quite a bit. And they said, well, we're doing this because in the event we kill you, nobody will be able to pick up anything.
Right.
Whether that is fact or not, only medical men will be able to tell you that.
Right. You said pressure was made to put on you to sign a statement. Were this statement against your other fellow detainees? What kind of pressure are we talking about?
As I've indicated, after a while, I began to speak about things which I wasn't supposed to speak. And then they wanted to make a confession and statement. And they put pressure on me to make it to a magistrate. They put pressure on me to make it to a policeman who was not a security policeman, which I refused. And they put so much pressure, and I refused. I eventually agreed to make a statement to the security police, which I did.
Okay. You also testified.
Okay, we're just momentarily leaving the testimony of...
Is the Hindi equivalent of the Bible?
Yes.
Just 2 more questions, Mr. Naidoo. After you were released from prison, did the security branch continue to harass you and your family?
After I was released. And
After
so,
you were released, yes.
well, we were always raided. We were given, sometimes you're given a notice to come to, and then at that stage I was living in Lenasia,
Right.
to come and to see the security police
Right.
in Protea. That happened. Then, I was detained coming back from Craddock.
Okay.
And there I was only held for 2 weeks and released, and then a few weeks later they raided my home again with lots of policemen.
So the harassment continued.
Yeah. And my son, in his matric year, was also detained and taken and held in detention.
Your son.
Yes. He wrote one matric paper in detention. Today he is Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank.
Well done. Mr. Naidoo, just one last question. Significantly, when you closed your evidence in chief on Friday, you said, look, the whole idea behind truth and reconciliation, the TRC, was truth and then there was reconciliation. And significantly, you said if there was no truth and reconciliation, and if there was no amnesty granted for anyone, there should be prosecutions.
Yes, I did say that.
To your knowledge, the TRC was the only amnesty commission that sat, am I correct?
That's correct.
Nothing further to this witness, my lord.
Thank you very much, my lord. Mr. Naidoo, I understand that it is difficult for you to testify about this terrible ordeal that you've gone through. I appear on behalf of Warrant Officer Detlefs and Lieutenant Ruth Venter, who were both members of the security branch. I don't think you have anything there was any dealings with Detlefs. But my instructions from Lieutenant Venter, from Ruth Venter, is that he's not a tall man and he doesn't have red hair. First of all, just to clear that, you were referring to the Captain Venter that was a tall man, and you were otherwise referring to a ginger person, obviously referring to red hair. However, my instructions from Ruth Venter is that he was in fact involved in your interrogation. Amongst other people, he also interrogated other people. My instruction further is that he was involved in assaults during these interrogation of yourself and other people. He's further instructed me that he did partake in insulting yourself and some of the other detainees. He further instructs me he was involved in insults and insulting detainees. Yes. It is further my instruction that he also spoke to you and other detainees in a derogative manner, belittling you and so forth. Mr. Venter says that he cannot remember full details of all his actions, but he knows that he did it. He went to the Truth and Reconciliation process. He did apply for amnesty for what he has done to you and certain other detainees, and in fact he was granted amnesty by the TRC in relation to the acts that he has done towards yourself and some of the other detainees. Do you have any comment on that, sir?
I wasn't aware, that he did apply for amnesty. And obviously, if he did apply and he was granted, as I indicated earlier on, that I accepted the TRC process.
Thank you, my Lord. I've got no further questions to this witness.
Any nomination?
I think from my side, my lord.
Mr. Naidoo, you were detained and later on charged.
That's correct.
When was that when they charged you?
I appeared in court in 83. I think it was March 83.
March 23.
And I was sentenced on the 1st of April 1983.
For how many years?
I was sentenced to 3 years, of which 2 years was suspended. I served 1 year.
So by 1984 you were back.
No, let me get this. Sorry. I was sentenced in 82. And I was released on the 1st of April 1983.
You will serve the sentence.
I served my sentence partly at the Fort Prison and partly at the Johannesburg Prison.
So you were never held, you were held at John Foster Square?
Yes. When I was initially arrested in 81, I was taken to John Foster Square. It was on a Friday.
Yeah.
After they processed me and took me to the 10th floor, and I've indicated there that Mr. Abri banged my head, and they took me to the cell in John Foster Square, where I was there for the weekend. And on Monday morning, I was taken for interrogation.
Where on the 10th floor?
To the 10th floor, yes.
So when were you transferred?
On Monday, I was interrogated at John Foster Square. They took me back late evening. Tuesday, I was interrogated at John Foster Square. They took me back to my cell in the evening. On Wednesday, they took me to John Foster Square, and I was being interrogated there. And then late in the afternoon, they drove me to Vereeniging. And they took me to a cell, and then, which seemed like just a few hours later, it was dark. They woke me up and took me to interrogation in Vereeniging police station.
So when you were there in November, prior to you being taken to Vereeniging, you did not perchance come across Neil?
Sorry, I didn't get
You
that.
did not see Neil on that result of it?
No, I personally didn't see Neil Aggett at any point. The only two people I saw during my detention were Feroz Kachalia and Jabu Ngwenya.
At John Foster? At John Foster?
Jabu Ngwenya I saw at John Foster. Feroz Kachalia I saw at the charge office in Vereeniging.
So you were returned after the death. You only came back to John Foster Square after Neil had died.
No, Your Honor. Neil, I think, died on the 5th of February.
Yes.
By that stage, I was already at Vereeniging.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. That on the day he passed away, you were not stationed you were not at John Foster.
No, Your Honor.
You only heard that he's there, but you never saw him.
No, I never knew him and I never saw him.
Or you didn't know him?
No.
The man, the security officer Stephen Whiteway, did you know him?
At the time, I didn't know him. You know, there were so many security police who were coming in and out, and doing all kinds of things. And one of those people that came in, I subsequently recognized him as, from a newspaper photograph as being Stephen Whitehead.
Did you take part in any of the interrogations?
By interrogation, you mean he asked me questions?
Yes.
No, he didn't really, but he did hit me.
Yes. Any questions about that?
And my lord?
No questions.
No.
My lord, none. So now, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You may now go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As the court pleases. My lord, our next witness is one Ishmael Momaniat. He's been waiting outside. One of my attorneys has just gone to bring him inside. As soon as he's here, we can proceed. My lord, we're actually about to hand up his affidavit. Perhaps we can do that in the interim. With the leave of the court, my lord, we'd like to hand up two affidavits. The first affidavit, my lord, is his recent affidavit, and actually only signed this affidavit on the 2nd of February. We wish to mark that as affidavit G17. The second affidavit is a statement that we have recovered from the record of the first inquest. And my lord, this affidavit should have had an exhibit number before the first inquest, but we were unable to locate any exhibit number for it, notwithstanding the fact that it is part of the first inquest record. So with the leave of the court, we'd like to give it an exhibit number G18. And we have distributed copies of these statements to our colleagues.
Well, it is a 1982 affidavit.
Indeed, my lord. That affidavit was signed on 10th of June 1982. It is styled as a statement. Actually, on the last page, it doesn't appear as if it was attested by the Commission of Oaths, although there are several signatures, so perhaps it was. My Lord, Mr. Ishmael Momaniat has arrived, so with the leave of the court, I'd like to call him to the stand.
Ishmael Momaniat?
Do you have any objection to take the vote?
No.
You swear that you have Mr. Holt nothing but the truth.
I swear.
Please raise your hand and say so.
Swear to God.
As the court pleases. Mr. Momaniat, firstly, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know that life at the Treasury is quite hectic and busy these days. Can you state for the court your current occupation?
I am the Deputy Director General at the National Treasury, responsible for tax and financial sector policy.
And Mr. Mamonia, do you have copies of the affidavit that you signed on the 2nd of February 1982? At least, sorry, 2nd February 2020, this year?
Yes, I do.
And do you confirm that it is your affidavit?
Yes, it is my affidavit.
And you confirm the contents therein?
I confirm the contents to the best of my knowledge, given it's 38 years ago.
Yes, indeed. And indeed, the fact that the events in question took place 38 years ago is an issue for all the witnesses, and we certainly understand that it's not always easy to recall detail. Before we proceed, do you also have with you a copy of your affidavit, or rather statement, that you made out on the 10th of June 1982?
Is that my affidavit at the first inquest?
At the first inquest?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you confirm that that is your statement, and you also confirm the contents therein?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mamoniat, can you give the court a brief overview of what you were doing, your occupation in 1982?
I was a junior lecturer in the Department of Mathematics at Wits University.
And your statement indicates that you were involved in political activism. Can you perhaps give the court some highlights of that activism leading up to your arrest and detention?
Yes, no, I was politically active from quite young, I guess, my school days. At university, I was involved with the Black Student Society when I started university at Wits. And towards 1981, we had a major campaign against the South African Indian Council. The South African Indian Council was an apartheid body that the apartheid government imposed on the Indian community. And up to then, it had been a nominated council, and the government then decided to have elections to get the Indian community to vote, and that took place on the 4th of November 1981. So it was just, around the time that, and just after Barbara Hogan was detained, and before many of my colleagues like Prema Naidoo and Feroz Kacharia were detained, shortly after that election day. It was a very successful boycott that we organized, with sort of at least 90% of all registered voters in the Indian community saying no, not going to vote. There was a total boycott, and in fact in some places like Fordsburg, 98% of registered voters didn't vote. So the government was quite angry that we had, quite a massive victory against the apartheid government at the time. And bear in mind, we lived in a very repressive state. So it was the only time where we could go out and to try and show that the elections were fair. We had the political space to go town by town and campaign. We had people like leaders like Mama Sisulu coming to address our campaign. She just happened to be unbanned for a few weeks or so we were lucky, we got her, and we had a massive rally in Indonesia which she addressed. We popularized at that time the Freedom Charter, because although the ANC was banned, the Freedom Charter itself was not banned, but people were scared to have copies, because anything, if you had copies linked to the ANC, or which the apartheid government saw as the ANC, you could get detained. Whether you got charged is another issue. So we were able to publish copies, distribute it door to door, and so it was quite a massive campaign involving not just the Indian community, but many of our comrades in the African and colored communities as well were involved with us, because we ran on a non-racial democratic South African ticket.
And presumably the overwhelmingly successful boycott of those elections incensed the apartheid government at that time.
Absolutely. And when we campaigned and we went door to door, we expected to be detained. We were harassed all the time. The security police were around. They were outside our meetings. They probably had their spies in the meetings. But we were clear these were open legal activities, even under apartheid. And though they don't like it, we knew that they would find it hard to convict us. Even though we knew that they could detain us, beat us up, interrogate us, torture us, and so on, because those were the methods that they used to intimidate people not to campaign against apartheid.
And it appears from your affidavit that you played a role in occupied positions at the Black Student Society at WITS, as well as the Transvaal anti-AIC committee, and then the Transvaal Indian Congress. What positions did you hold in those organizations?
So I was an executive of the BSS in the early days, I forget which year, but I was the secretary of the Transvaal Anti-AIC committee, which then morphed into the Transvaal Indian Congress in 1983. The Transvaal Indian Congress, I was secretary there too, but that was only after the detentions in 1983, as we prepared to then oppose the tricameral parliament, where there was another vote, and which led to the formation of the UDF.
Perhaps now we can turn to your arrest and detention. Can you describe your arrest on the 20th of January 1982?
Yes.
It was the 20th of January.
20th.
What happened was I was staying at my parents' home in Indonesia, and they got a call to ask if I was there. And as soon as I think my mother answered and confirmed I was there, the doorbell rang and they told her to open up because they were coming to arrest me. So they came into the house, they searched the house, they confiscated things. I've got the schedule of documents and so on that they confiscated as well. And I was told that I was arrested under, I think it was Section 22 of the Internal Security Act.
From the house you were taken to John Vorster Square. Can you indicate who you saw there and what happened?
Okay, so there was a whole team of security branch in the cars, okay, and they put me in one of the cars, took me to John Vorster Square, to the 10th floor, and at some point, as soon as I was there, I was taken into the office of Major Cronwright, who was in charge of the case, and I remember present there was Captain Swanepoel, because at some point he was put in charge of my interrogation, assisted by Lieutenant Fenter. Then, basically, there was a lot of news around the arrest of Barbara Hogan and the subsequent arrest of many detainees, I think on the 21st or 22nd of November, including, I think, Neil Aggett was detained on that day. The parents of many of the detainees had organized quite a high-profile campaign leading to organization called the TPSA, or the Detainees Parent Support Committee. And and just being political activists, we kind of always try to guess that if one of our comrades are detained, what have they been detained for? I think I remember that we understood at some point that Barbara had been detained and that some of our names were on the list. Now, as it is, normally we'll be ready to be detained at any time. But certainly once these detentions happened, we were ready to be detained. And in fact, we were surprised, some of us, when we weren't detained in November. So that was good news for some of us. And then on the 20th of Jan, they came for me. I think they had gone for Shirish Nanabai a week or two before I was detained. So we were appeared to be the last lot of detainees linked to the Barbara Hogan case.
And in fact, you suggest in your affidavit that Major Conrad confirmed these linkages when he spoke to you in his office.
In fact, he said, you know what this case is all about. You've read about it. I know you will have read about it in the press. Basically, you know, the key was Barbara Hogan, and they had got us. They're going to, they wanted to know everything about my relationship with Barbara Hogan. Of course, the way the security branch talked, it's like they know everything. I.e., if you don't talk the truth, we'll know you're not talking the truth. Everyone else has spoken, so we want to know everything. And he also knew about obviously the anti-site campaign, and he said to me it was an ANC front, and I needed to tell him everything.
You were then taken to the district surgeon, even before you were locked up in your cell.
Yes. It seems a procedure then, so he spoke to me, and then I think I waited around, and either before or after I was taken to the district surgeon, I guess just to prove that I had no injuries or whatever. The district surgeon was a Dr. Jacobson, who I kind of had been to his surgery before. It was out on Harrison Street. Because I had a previous detention in 1980, and I was held in the same cells at John Foster Square, and so it was the same procedure. I had been taken to him a few times to be examined by him.
And after that examination, you were taken to your cell on the second floor of John Foster Square, which happened to be cell number 204. And you also indicate that your cell was located quite close to those of a few others. You said that out in paragraph 16. Who were these others?
So, if I face my cell, on my left it was Eric Matonga, who was at that time with the South African Allied Workers Union, SAWU. On my right was Samuel John Tabo Lerumo, who was, well, I was young then as well, 25, but I thought he was young. He was, I think, at least 18, 19. And one or two cells next to him was Neil Aggett's cell. And as I noted later, Frank Chikani, who at that stage I didn't know personally, had a cell near or opposite Neil's cell. Firoz Kachalia was on my left after, I think, Eric. But, you know, there were two types of cells. Okay, the cell that I went to in 204 was a very large room cell, and it had windows, and if I remember, it didn't have perspex at the time. Every cell has obviously a big cell door which kind of seals you, but also had an L-shaped grilled steel door. And I had been in my previous detention in a cell next, one or two cells away, so I kind of knew the territory in a sense. Now in 1980, I think the outside windows used to open out, and I remember we were able to talk to family who would come at night. This time we couldn't talk to people outside because, if I remember correctly, the windows were now sealed. You couldn't open the windows, so you couldn't talk through the windows to people outside.
Paragraph 24 of your statement, you suggest that your cell, at least at that time, was quite bare. Can you elaborate? Sorry, paragraph 18, Robert. Can you elaborate on what you had with you at that time and why it was so bare?
Look, generally when you got detained under security legislation, you really literally had nothing, okay? They gave you possibly a Bible, which would be in the cell, or they would bring a Bible to leave there. There was a hard bunk on which you could, cement bunk, you could sit, and then you were given a mat, a blanket, and I think you had a pillow or something which you could then sleep on. So that was it. There's absolutely nothing, aside from the Bible, nothing else to read, totally bare. And of course, at John Foster, they would have a toilet system, toilet in the cell, but no, I mean, that had a chain and so on, but so you could flush it, but no taps and so on. So we would get these polystyrene sort of big cup, and you'd have one or two of those, and you'd fill water, so you would have that, and perhaps you would have a cup, a polystyrene cup. Those were the only things that you had in your cell. If I remember, your towels, belts, watches, shoelaces, all of that was taken away and put into a room, into a separate room. Even your clothes would be kept there, and if I remember, you would have to go and fetch your, when you wanted to change your clothing, you would have to go and fetch your clothing. If memory serves me well, I don't think we were allowed to even keep clothes in our cell. There was nothing else.
And where would you go to collect extra clothing and other items?
So there was, on the second floor, there was an office close to where I think, like, the police in charge there was Warrant Officer McPherson. And either it was his office or next to his office, but it was a small room where everyone's clothes and towels and whatever else they allowed you was kept there.
Some have referred to that room as the property room.
Yes.
For what it's worth.
Property and medicine, I think.
Yes. So, why did they hold your shoelaces, belts, towels, and what have you?
Presumably, I mean, I don't know why, but presumably they said so that you don't hang yourself.
Right. You presumably heard the evidence that the late Dr. Neil Aggett allegedly hanged himself with a long scarf known as a kakoi. You never had such an item in your cell?
No.
Did your parents come through with parcels from time to time?
Yes, I received parcels, and I don't eat meat, and the police didn't know how to handle that, so perhaps they allowed me more food parcels than others. So I started getting parcels quite early on of food, but again, those would be just in small packs. You don't, nothing much else.
Mm. And at a certain stage, did they ease up and perhaps allow you an extra book or two or other items?
Look, you were generally not allowed any books in detention. But after Neil died, after Dr. Aggett died, they loosened up, and I was allowed novels and so on. They also allowed me, which I also found odd, they gave me my maths textbooks. I think I say it's on the 29th of Jan, which was sort of about 9 days after my detention. I mean, generally, whilst you're going through your interrogation, you have nothing, okay, and they make sure you have nothing. They made sure you had nothing. But at some point, when I completed my first statement, they gave me, I think, 2 or 3 textbooks, but no paper and pen, just the textbooks, okay. And but it's only after Dr. Aggett passed away that, and I think we knew that they were under pressure. So suddenly, got a visit from my parents, suddenly you got books. Those weren't the norm, and certainly in my previous detention of 2 weeks, I had absolutely nothing like that. In fact, later they even gave us radios, and people would listen to Radio Freedom in a cell. So it was quite something.
Thank you. Let's now turn to your interrogation, which you say began on the morning of 21st January 1982. You indicate from paragraph 25 of your affidavit that you were interrogated at least 10 times. You describe this as your primary interrogation. Can you give an indication as to why you refer to it as your primary interrogation?
So it's your first set of interrogations, and they were pretty intense because it was literally every day. I was lucky that I wasn't called on. I was called on the first Saturday as well, but Sundays were free. But so they could. But as I indicated, I noticed that Neil was out the entire weekend, the last weekend that he lived. So my primary interrogation. So I get detained on the 20th. Then every day thereafter, I get called and taken to the 10th floor on at least 10 occasions. So it was the Thursday, the Friday. I was detained on the Wednesdays, the 20th. The Thursday, the Friday, and the Saturday I was taken up. The Sunday I was free, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, week 2 I call it. And then the following week, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Thursday, I think at night or in the morning of the first was when Neil was killed, in my view. So that's my primary interrogation. Generally, interrogation involved giving you paper and you had to write a statement. Okay. Now, if you're very strong, you refuse to even do that, and they could really beat you and torture you up, because this is a game of power. So I think many of us, when we went into detention, we were clear that the key thing is not to think that you are so strong and then you break and then you talk like a canary to the cops, tell them everything. And remember, we're not talking about illegal activities. We're talking about, we didn't want the security branch to know how we were organizing, who was organizing. We tried to minimize the number of names that they would ever be aware of. So some of us played a high-profile role, and others played a low-profile role. So generally, you have a statement, and because we were involved in open campaigns, in fact, in my case, I followed it up by saying all the anti-site campaign meetings we had in every dorpy, frankly, of the old Transvaal. Okay, we went. And to just say what we said. Don't vote for apartheid, don't vote for the SABC. Of course, they got fed up because they wanted to know what's your links to the ANC, what did you do with Barbara Hogan, and they want you to implicate both yourself and your comrades or others. So you made sure that those things you don't do. You just tell them what we know they know. So once you do your statement, and in fact the statement, you're sitting, you're completing your statement, they come in, they read it, they beat you up, they say you're lying, even if it's just a tactic, or you're not telling them everything, and I do outline things that they would do. And in fact, even before the statement started, on my first day of interrogation on the 22nd, I was taken to a room. There were 10 or more big white men, okay, very intimidating, and basically, you know, smacking me and treating me like a ball, like one hits you and then you go to the other, that guy hits you.
So this started, in fact, even before they put a question to you?
Yes.
I think we do need to hear from you what happened at that particular time, what they were saying to you, as you suggested, shouting to you. If you recall, who was involved in that altercation.
So look, I know Cronwright himself wasn't there in that one, but it was Captain Struik, Visser, and then my two primary interrogators were Captain Swanepoel, Lieutenant Venter, and all the other guys. I mean, you don't obviously notice who they are, and it's my first day, so I don't sort of know them yet. But all you know is there's this big, very intimidating, cruel people whose only job is to beat you up, okay? And of course, going in, you expect the worst, that you're going to be tortured, you're going to be kept for days, as other detainees would be. But that was, I saw, just as softening me up. The thing they didn't do with me was, with many detainees, I know it took them 1 or 2 or 3 weeks before they get detained, and then they were in isolation before they get interrogated. With me, they were clearly in a hurry. I got a sense they wanted to confirm certain things. That's why they got me there, from whatever information that they would have had. And so, you know, they get me in this room. That's how they try and soften me up. And
did they use any derogatory language at you?
Oh, that was used all the time. Okay, so calling me a coolie, reminding one of, you know, Ahmed Timol, and that you'll meet the same fate. And they might have talked of others, you know, whether it's Stephen Biko or others. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but it was clear to a detainee that you were totally in their hands, totally under their control. They could do to you what they liked. You did not have access to your lawyer. You did not have access to your family. There was nothing you could do, nothing, okay? They could torture you, they could keep you up for days, they could do what they liked, they could kill you in detention. So that's a fact that you knew, okay? There's nobody there to help you, okay? We weren't living in a democracy. It's a repressive, extremely repressive and brutal state. Once they did that, they then put me on a chair to say, write, okay, and gave me pen and paper. Frankly, in my own mind, I thought, phew, at least they didn't half kill me, okay? Just clubs and a few bruises here or there, you know. I considered myself lucky, okay, for now, for them, because you live for the moment, okay, when you're in detention. And it's how do you survive those few minutes, that day? How are you going to survive without breaking, without telling the security branch anything material?
So at that time, you didn't know the names of the officers involved in this, what effectively is an assault, treating you like a bouncing ball. But later you came to learn of their names. And how did you come to learn of their names?
So you come to learn of the names. Sometimes they would tell you their names. Sometimes just as they referred to each other. And certainly with the Aggett inquest, their full names came out, so you would know exactly who it was. Because I remembered all of them, most of them, especially those who beat me up or interrogated me. Those I knew. I knew who they were. So yes, and obviously Swanepoel and Venter I knew probably from the first day of the first day of my interrogation, because then you would be put in an office, you know, with a desk, standard government paper lined, and you write, and they sit there or they stand there and ask you, you know, to write. So, and it's a game of cat and mouse. They tell you to write, and you say, what about? And they might smack you and say, you know what, okay? And or they might say, no, we want to know about Barbara Hogan, or this or that, or you're an ANC front, or who are your contacts, or so in a sense they want you to say, and obviously if it's something they don't know about, they would then, it's manna from heaven for them then, and they pursue that line. But in my case, because our activities were open and legal, telling them about the anti-psych campaign was fine. It was reported in the media. We would have media coming to our meetings. We wanted publicity during the campaign, so it wasn't a secret to tell them. Dr. Jessup, who was the chair of our committee, addressed the meeting, or Dr. Ram Saluji spoke. All the messages were, don't vote for a party. So we tell them that. And of course then they would get cross, because they would say, you're only telling us the obvious stuff. They would want to know more. So that's just the nature of the interrogations.
But you can confirm that the incident on your first day of interrogation, where you had been treated as a bouncing ball, and even though it was a light episode of assault, you can confirm that Captain Swanepoel and Lieutenant Venter, Lieutenant Rulo Venter, was present.
Yes, they would have been.
Now, in paragraph 32, you give more detail about the interrogations and the tactics that they would employ. And you confirm that Captain Swanepoel and Lieutenant Venter were your primary investigators. Just for the benefit of the court, who were they reporting to?
They were all reporting to, as they would say, the Mayor, I can't pronounce it, but Major Cronwright. And you could see often when they had something, they would go straight to him.
And what role was Captain Struwig playing?
So Struwig, though, he was like seemingly the same as Captain Swanepoel. He seemed to be more senior than him. I don't know why, but he would come in, and he was a brutal man. Big, really cruel. But he would come, read the statement, hit me, and he somehow knew that when I was young I had a minor sort of heart issue. Heart was just beating fast or something. So obviously when I had gone to the security police, you also play up that, you've got a heart problem. So he says, oh, you've got a heart problem, and sort of slapped me on my heart and, smacked me and whatever. And he did that several times. He would come and say that, including, by the way, I think in the first day when I was treated as a bouncing ball. So he wouldn't directly interrogate me. He would just come, or he might ask a question, or he may look at the statement, and that's what he would do. There was another Captain Frisser who did the same, and also smacked me and so on, just on the statement. And all the time it's threats. In fact, Struwig even came and said to me, I'm a coolie and he's a boer, like proudly, okay, which was fine. But it was asserting that they were in power and they were going to squash anyone who tries to oppose them. That was always the approach that the security police took. They were right no matter what, and they were right because they were in power and we had no rights. And I think clearly I do say later that, compared to my black African comrades, they would regard them as nothing, okay? They're not human beings. That's how the security police behave. And that's why I think that they would get generally the worst treatment of all. I have no doubt about that. Okay. Now I'm an Indian detainee. I'm kind of, they might talk a bit more, but that's it. But when they wanted something, it didn't matter whether you're black or white. They would go for you. So they would go for Dr. Aggett. As I saw, he was going under great stress, and I'll deal with that in my statement. It doesn't matter who you are. Once they have a case and they're going for you, they will go for you.
Yes, we're going to get to your interactions with Dr. Aggett shortly. Before we do, how would you describe the character and role of the man in charge of your interrogation, Captain Swanepoel?
Look, Swanepoel was not very bright, to put it mildly. And he actually, compared to the others, was, he wasn't a brutal guy. He had a bit of a soft side. Look, you have to watch when you're under detention, they play good cop, bad cop, One is brutal, the other one who comes is nice to you, okay? You mustn't, I think we had educated ourselves not to fall for such cheap tactics. But he generally looked okay. Yes, he may have smacked me and told me to stand, like on 2 occasions, 2 or 3 I think, or more, I don't know, but a few occasions. I had to stand, take off my jersey and top and stand sort of naked, waist up, and they kept me, I don't know, standing for an hour. Not too long, would be about an hour. You don't have a watch, so it's hard to know, but you would stand. And at one occasion, Lieutenant Fenter, and this would be related to the statement. I haven't said everything, so I must stand until I come right, okay? Then they tell you to sit and you start the statement again. So on one occasion they were fed up with me, and Lieutenant Fenter said he's going to give me electric shocks, and he went out as if he was going to do so. Fortunately, he never came back with the equipment, and they didn't give me electric shocks. But so that's how they would treat me. A few smacks. Fenter was smarter than Swanepoel, but a much harder man. He really wanted hard info, and so he would be more, much smarter in your statement to know that actually they want more than that, and so on. So, it was that kind of treatment. And then they would constantly report to the major or have others come and they beat you up and so on.
So if they were employing the good cop, bad cop strategy, I think you're suggesting that Captain Swanepoel was the very good cop. If that's the case, then would Lieutenant Fenter have been the bad cop in your view?
Yes. But much worse would be Struik, Visser, Deska, Prince. They were like madmen. When they came, it was like they just wanted to beat you up.
Well, let's talk about these other more vicious police officers, and you do make reference from paragraphs 33 and 34 onwards about the role of Captain Visser, as well as Warrant Officer Prince and Des Carr. So you feel free to start with any one of them. What particularly stands out in relation to the abuse you say they meted out?
So Des Carr was, if I remember, quite a stocky man, ginger hair. He even looked cruel, okay, if you can look cruel, okay. And he would basically come, maybe he would read the statement, but when he came, he was very aggressive from the start and would just beat you up and then read the statement, okay, whilst you're sitting. But in his case, he would even come from behind to scare me, okay, and before I know it, pick me up and manhandle me, okay. And they would boast about what they would do to other detainees. So the other guy who was there, was Warrant Officer Prince, was also like, said he was anti-communist, and he would again be similar to Des Carr, look at the statement, smack you, this sort of thing. And in fact, he boasted that he had beaten up Firoz Kachalia. Now, they would say those things firstly because they would be boasting, okay? They were proud of what they did. Secondly, because they wanted to intimidate you, because the implicit message was, and we're going to beat you up too, as we've beaten up your friend Firoz. So, those were routine. But look, as I say, I think this was still it was hard. And yes, you never know what's going to happen, and that the following day could be worse. But looking back, it was relatively light compared to, I think, what my friend Prema Naidoo went through, what Neil Aggett went through, what Frank Chikane and others went through. And that's why I say that, it was a game of cat and mouse, and depending on what they wanted. And in a sense, I was lucky that I was coming at the end of the investigation, and they seemed in a hurry to want to complete the investigation. So it does seem like they wanted to confirm things. They weren't really asking me original questions about Barbara Hogan, for example. They asked, but they could have, asked in a harder way.
So, in paragraph 37, you set out, I suppose, a litany of abuse and ill treatment, and you do so as well in paragraph 10 of your 1982 statement. Can you set out for the benefit of the court the kinds of abuse that you sustained at the hands of these officers?
Okay. Look, generally, lots of, smacks, claps, okay, with an open palm. Lots of shaking. Lots of punches. I mean, when I was around, punches, kicks, whatever, okay. Getting me to stand waist up a few times just to stand. Being threatened all the time, first being humiliated all the time, being called a coolie, being called, I don't know, whatever they had in their heads they would call you, being threatened that I'm going to go to jail if I don't cooperate, 5 years. I mean, there was this thing that this was a mini Livonia trial. Okay, I don't think it really compared to Livonia, but that's what they were. They had a lot of people in detention, and they were going to convict people. And and threats of electric shocks and more torture. But they didn't actually torture me severely or gave me electric shocks in the end. But lots of threats to that effect, or that they would keep you up for the whole night and the whole day and so on. Those threats were there all the time.
And you were forced to undress?
When I had to stand up, yes, I had to, if I remember, at least take off, I think, my jersey and top. So I was naked waist upward. I think they let me leave my trousers on.
And at that point in time, both Captain Swanepoel and Lieutenant Fencer were present?
Yes, definitely, they were present.
And you say in your statement that you were threatened with a penknife blade. What happened there?
Oh yes, that was Des Carr. And this was much later, because I wanted to put for the record that they had assaulted me. And the first time I had the opportunity to do that was actually on the very day that Dr. Aggett died, when I was taken to Dr. Jacobson on the 5th of February. And I can come to that. I did not know when I visited him that Dr. Aggett was dead. Okay, so I got taken there, and I reported the assault. And look, he was quite friendly, the doctor. Maybe because he knew me from a previous detention, and I told him that I was assaulted, but I didn't want him to write it down, and he said no, if I ever need it, I should record it. So I gave him more details, but I was careful just to record the assault, but not actually name names. Because if you name a particular cop, you know they're going to come for you and that you'd be beaten up. But if you kept it just general, that you got slaps and you got this and you got that, it's kind of easier. And so Des Carr came and I mean that really upset them. And I think it's important to note that, because once Dr. Aggett died, we felt that we had a bit more space to push the cops, okay, that they were under pressure and they couldn't have a second body. So in a way we became a bit braver, okay, or a bit more, we went for them a bit more aggressive, I would say, not braver, aggressive, okay. But mildly aggressive, you can't be too aggressive, you're still in detention. And so he called me, I think, to ask me to be a state witness. Obviously I had said no, I was very clear I would never be a state witness against any of my comrades. And he put his pen knife, opened it up and did, put it on my neck and then, pretended like this is how he'd slit my throat. I think this he did much later, a month later or so in March, if I remember.
Yes, you say 5th of March 1982.
Yes. And can I say, that's what surprised me, is the extent they went to try and get me to retract my statement of assault. So as soon as I say to Dr. Jacobson, now I'm not saying, we were very clear that whatever you told anyone in the system, the security police would know about it. So I expected that what I said to Dr. Jacobson would be known to the security branch that very day. And yes, then a few days later I saw a magistrate, I think his name was Mr. Mouton, and I told him as well. And immediately thereafter there was a Lieutenant Olivier who called me to ask me about the arrest, about the assault, and he said to me things like, security branch are also human and sometimes they lose it. At some point I asked him for pen and paper. I said, I've got my maths textbooks, but I don't have pen and paper. And he said, yes, I want a pen and paper because I want to write to Helen Suzman. And he told me I can write the letter and I must give him the letter and he'll put it in an envelope and send it to Helen Suzman. Okay. And then even much later, because they would want you to retract, like I told him, look, I don't intend to charge anybody, okay? And obviously whilst you're in Section 6, you're not going to tell them you're going to charge them. I said, I just wanted it recorded. He didn't, and he said if I ever charged police, he would be a witness that I had said I wouldn't want to charge. And I realized that's neither here or there. But even later, I had Captain Swanepoel and Fenter coming and asking me to withdraw and write a statement and so on and so on.
Mr. Mohammed, we are going to return to your complaint and what happened shortly. Lord, it is 11:15. If we can make a time for the tea jam.
Thank you.
All rise.
Momoniat, you still under oath? That you will possess your
As the court pleases. Mr. Momoniat, just before the tea break, you had explained that you had visited the district surgeon, Dr. Jacobson. That was your second visit, and it was on the 5th of February 1982, and that you had in fact complained of assault by certain security branch officers. And you also indicated that sometime later, and according to paragraph 49 of your affidavit, that was on the 11th of March 1982, you were summoned to the 10th floor by Lieutenant Fenter and Captain Swanepoel, and they made certain requests. Can you just elaborate what those requests or demands were?
They accused me of lying to the district surgeon and suggested that I make a statement denying the assaults. Of course, when the security branch and you're there are suggesting, they're telling you, okay? Now, okay, I was surprised but not surprised that they knew what the doctor had clearly told them or someone, and and they kind of also tried to play it down, and they said no, it was just a pat on the head or something, but they wanted me to withdraw. I don't think that meeting went anywhere. I just said, I was assaulted. I've not given names, and left it at that. And I think I was then called even the following day, because so there was quite a follow-up, that they were concerned. And of course, with Dr. Aggett having died, I knew that, as I said earlier, that they were under pressure not to have any more open assaults and so on. So we had a bit more space to push and to say no to their attempts. But they were very persistent, and the threat of assault was still there. As long as it doesn't leave marks, they could still do it. They could still keep you up for a few days. So the prospect of torture is always there.
And according to your 1982 statement, you did in fact, you were in fact taken to Sergeant Blom. It appeared that happened on the 19th of February, and she indicated that she was independent and investigating charges of detainees on behalf of the minister. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And can you elaborate on your interaction with Sergeant Blom?
Okay. Firstly, it's laughable when they come and they say they're representing the minister and they're an independent channel. Okay. I mean, the Minister of Justice was probably, a minister in an apartheid government, the people behind the repressive state. So I certainly didn't inspire any confidence that telling her the minister would come on our side. If anything, they were ultimately the people responsible for the repression. So both her and I think I had also a visit from Mr. Mouton, the Inspector of Detainees, who said a similar thing, that he represents the minister. But in any case, I thought it's important to tell them that I was assaulted, so I kept to my basic points, that I had been assaulted, smacks, this, that, etc. And just, I didn't want to name names. And I told them that, I told Sergeant Blom that I won't lay charges whilst I'm under Section 6, because I think she asked. And I should add, I remember that as soon as I finished, I saw her go to the Major's office. So that's how independent she was. Okay.
Which Major?
Major Conrad.
Right. And just for the record, Mr. Momoniat, it appears that your complaint was in fact referred to the Attorney General, who declined to prosecute.
Okay.
And my Lord, that appears from page 810 of the record, where Advocate de Vries, who was the evidence leader for the state, indicated to the first inquest court that the Attorney General had declined to prosecute Mr. Momoniat, Mr. Nabai, Kachalia, and Chikani. Now, Mr. Momoniat, I want to refer to an exhibit from the first inquest that is the statement of one Rudolf Jacobus Venter. I don't know if you have that copy before you.
Yes, I do.
It's marked as Exhibit B5.1.2. My Lord, just for your ease of reference, I do have a copy if you wish to see it. I want to draw your attention to two paragraphs. And my Lord, this would be the third and fourth last paragraphs on this one-page affidavit, or rather the third paragraph from the bottom of the affidavit, my Lord.
Yes.
And perhaps I'll just read it into the record. It's in Afrikaans.
Yes.
And Mr. Momoniat, just indicate whether you understand or whether you would need us to translate it for you. Vanaf 20 January 1982, I'll do the dates in English, to 16th of February 1982, was ek tesame met kaptein D. Swanepoel gemoed met die ondervraging van I. Momoniat. Hierdie ondervraging het geskied in 'n kantoor skuins oorkant die teekamer. Do you follow that sentence?
So he's saying that they were given a task to interrogate me, and that the interrogation took place in an office opposite the tea room.
Yes, so between 20th January and 16th February, Lieutenant Venter, together with Captain Swanepoel, were tasked with your interrogation, and it took place in an office next to the tea room. And then the other paragraph I want to read into the record is the next paragraph. Gedurende genoemde tydperke van ondervraging aan die genoemde aangehoudenis was nie een van die aangehoudenis in my teenwoordigheid aangerand, gedreig of beledig nie, en nie een van hulle teenoor my gekla in hierdie verband nie. Do you follow that paragraph?
Can you, I broadly do, but I think if you can just
Okay,
go through.
I'll give it a rough translation, and if I err in any way, I'm sure the court or one of my colleagues will correct me. So, Lieutenant Venter is declaring in that paragraph that during the aforesaid time period of interrogation dealing with yourself, there was no instance of assault in his presence, and neither were you threatened or intimidated in any way, and furthermore, you didn't complain in connection with any such matters, at least to Lieutenant Venter.
He's lying that there was no assault. In fact, he was one of the people who did assault me and threatened to give me electric shocks. And that appeared to me just to be routine in the way he dealt with detainees. So he's lying, and he would know that he's lying, in my view. Obviously, you can't complain to the person who beats you up. I mean, we complained, as you saw, through to the doctor, to the magistrate, to whoever else came, but that wasn't specifically one of the security police team. And as you asked me earlier, he and Captain Swanepoel called me because they knew about Dr. Jacob's statement and they wanted me to withdraw it. So he was aware of it at some point, that I did complain.
I wish to refer you to a second document. And my Lord, I provided that document with the first document. This is an amnesty decision with the reference number AC 99/0029. My Lord, this is in fact an annex that was attached to the affidavit of the investigating officer who handed up a list of annexes on the very first day of this reopened inquest. My Lord, it is marked FGK 17 sub 1. Mr. Mamonia, do you have a copy of this before you?
No.
I do have another copy. Perhaps you can just pass one on. So this is a decision of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Amnesty Committee dealing with an application in terms of Section 18 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Enabling Act number 34 of 1995. And it deals with the application of one Rudolf Jacobus Venter, and his reference is AM 2774/96. And if I can ask you to turn to page 2, because he made multiple applications for amnesty, but we only wish to deal with the second one reflected in this decision. And if you drop down the page to the 5th paragraph, and I will read portions of the decision to you. The application deals with, and this is now at the 5th paragraph on that page, assault, criminal injuria and intimidation on a number of detainees during the investigation known as the Barbara Hogan investigation at John Vorster Square, Johannesburg, 1 December 1981 to 17 June 1982. It then goes on in the next paragraph. The applicant at the time, a member of the security branch of the South African Police, was part of a team which interrogated a number of detainees. In the course of the interrogation, these detainees were assaulted and also insulted. The victims include the following people: Prema Naidoo, Jabu Ngwenya, Shiris Nanabai, Ishmael Mamoniat, Monty Naso, Samson Ndog. I'm not going to read all the detail, just perhaps the last sentence of the next paragraph. The purpose of the interrogation was to extract information for the purpose of combating the political activities of such trade unions. And in the next paragraph, the assault was, in our view, associated with a political objective. The applicant has also met the other requirements for amnesty. Amnesty is therefore granted in respect of the offences of, and then he lists the very same crimes mentioned above, namely assault, criminal injuria, and intimidation of the detainees, including yourself. Now, Mr. Mamoniat, I just want to seek your reaction to the fact that Mr. Rudolf Venter applied for amnesty for the assault, criminal injuria and intimidation perpetrated against yourself and others during your detention in early 1982, in the light of the fact that Mr. Venter went under oath before the first inquest and said that you were not touched in his presence.
So it seems to me he's clearly admitting that he did assault us and therefore he applied for amnesty, and that appears to be in contradiction to what he said. And as I said, he was lying in his first affidavit at the time of the inquest when he denied assaulting me.
Yes, indeed. It doesn't appear. The application and the decision reflects that Mr. Fenter admits that you were assaulted, also insulted and intimidated, and he sought amnesty from the Truth Commission's Amnesty Committee in that regard. He was indeed granted amnesty. So it does reflect that he was lying, he was committing perjury before the first inquest.
I wasn't aware of this, but thanks for letting me know.
So do you know whether an amnesty application was ever confronted with us that affidavit? The 1982 one? You don't know it, but never introduced.
Lord, it's not clear from the decision whether he was confronted with the earlier affidavit. Although I suppose perhaps in the evidence it might have transpired. We can look into that. Mr. Monius, I now want to take you to your interactions with the late Dr. Neil Aggett while in security branch detention. And you have very helpfully set out some detail, in fact a great deal of detail, both in your 1982 affidavit as well as in the affidavit that you have recently made out. And this part of the evidence will be of particular interest to this court. Did you know Dr. Neil Aggett before you were detained?
No, I didn't know him before I was detained, but obviously I followed the news very closely, and in November 1981, when he and many others were detained, I think it was the night of 21 or 22 November, that I noted all the names of the people who were detained. So I had heard of him, but I didn't know him.
And you indicate that you attempted to keep a rudimentary calendar to track time and the duration of your detention. I'd like you to explain to the court what kind of system you used for this purpose. And my Lord, to assist you, I want to hand up a copy of a document that's already an exhibit before this court, because it was put up in the first inquest. It's marked B3.5.6.
Yes. So when I got a pen and paper, so it would have been after the 19th of February, just given the request I had made to Lieutenant Olivier. I made a record of just what I did every day, and just whilst my memory was fresh, to try and remember what happened every day of my detention. The point is, when you detain, and I'd learned this even as a important to do, is you in a cell, it's solitary confinement. You don't see anyone except for the police. You only see people who are hostile to you. You can't talk to your fellow detainees. Yes, we might have found one or two surreptitious ways later of communicating, but generally you're not allowed to talk to them, not even greet them. Okay. Also, so it's very easy to lose a sense of time, and I was very clear that you needed to keep, you needed your brain to be active, you needed to know what day it was, etc. And so I did this, and bear in mind, in doing this, I know that if the security police, because they would search your cells, and in fact, I have no doubt that Warrant Officer McPherson would do that when we were taken out of the cells, and they would check everything. We also assumed the cells were bugged and so on generally. So you have to be careful. So I made it a very simple thing of just saying, on this day I marked it with E if I exercise, and then I marked it with a cross without saying what the cross was. But the cross was all the days I was taken out to the 10th floor. That's why I could remember the dates that I was on. I just noted the day they gave me textbooks, days that I read certain novels. At some point I in fact had to remind myself from these notes that I had some minor injury on my ankle, which I think was in a cell. It wasn't due to the interrogation or anything, but it was much later. So I would just note those things so I had a sense of the time and what I was doing when. So if you look at this, and not that I did not register anything about Dr. Aggett, but if you look at this, you will see that in my first week, so that I'm detained on the Wednesday 20th, I'm interrogated, as I said earlier, 3 times: the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday. I'm taken to the 10th floor from the cells at John Foster. The following week, of the 25th of Jan, I was interrogated for 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I noticed from the record, see, Neil Aggett was not, the first 3 days when I went, like all the other detainees, they had already done their spell of interrogation. So in other words, they had done their first round or their primary interrogation, as I call it. And they would only get called up if they wanted to confirm something, and for a short while perhaps. And I'll come to how he was, I didn't know him, but my first interaction with him was, I put it to the Sunday, 24th, because that's the only day I was in the cells. I had a shower, and I'll come to that, and I'll come to that in a moment, where I had a brief opportunity to have a short chat with him. But every other day, the 25th, 26th, so the Monday to the Friday of that week, they started interrogating him, and he was taken, and I confirmed from the records at the time of the inquest, that he and I, therefore, were about the only people then being interrogated. So they would come and fetch you, Your Honor, from the cells, and you had to do what they call the exercise and your shower first. So before, they might be feeding others, but before they open the other cells, generally they open the cells of the people to be interrogated. They get taken to the shower, not together, separately, everything separate. Okay. And that's why I saw a lot of him and was in close proximity to him, because when either we would be passing each other, because I'll be in a shower, he'd be walking up the corridor, say, or vice versa, okay? Because at some point he wasn't walking, which I'll come to, but you would see him from a few meters. You couldn't talk because the security branch or policemen were always there, and they generally were mainly the black policemen, okay? Because that's all they got used for, is to escort you up and down and to check that you're in a cell and so on, and that you have your shower. Only white policemen interrogated you, okay? And then the following, that weekend of the I think it's the 30th and 31st of Jan, I was not interrogated that weekend. In fact, they had even given me those textbooks, as I said, on the Friday. And what happened was that Neil was not there.
Normally, before we get to the 30th of January, if we can just go back a little bit.
But can I just say this?
Okay.
What I was going to say was, for 5 days in my second week of detention, and for the 4 days of the following week, Neil and I were taken up on the same days. Not necessarily at the same time, but it would have been early morning. So I had 9 days where he and I were taken to the 10th floor at the same time, on the same day.
Indeed, and you in fact indicate that you had several occasions to glimpse sight of Dr. Aggett at that time. My Lord, for the record, the rudimentary calendar that the witness refers to is attached to that document titled Notes on Consultation with Mr. Nomoniat on 7th September 1982. And it is quite a good contemporaneous record of his experiences in detention. You do indicate that you only got your pen and paper at a later stage, once your interrogation had ended on the 29th of February 1982.
My interrogation ended on the 4th of February.
Okay.
My first round of interrogation.
Right. But you indicate in paragraph 53 that you didn't have pen and paper in your cell before Dr. Aggett died, and you can only start working on this rudimentary calendar after his death.
Yes.
So then, how did you go about reconstructing the calendar to reflect the earlier days?
Well, I still sort of remembered, okay, because I was interrogated every day except for the 2 Sundays and the second Saturday. I knew that I was interrogated every day, so I could get the days right of my interrogation. I knew when it stopped. I knew when I'd been to the doctor, because obviously the date of the 5th February, I mean, I will never forget in my life, okay? Because that's the day we learned that someone amongst us had died. And so that became a kind of benchmark of, the events before Neil died and the events after Neil died. So I could obviously remember those things, and I therefore just went back and just recorded, because you'll see the only thing I said was X when I've been interrogated, E when I was exercising, and I wanted to note when you exercise, because when you are in a cell all by yourself and you have nothing, you feel every second of the day, every second, it's hell, okay? It's torture by itself. There is nothing to do. You have your hard bunk or you can sleep. Very easy to get depressed if you allow yourself. You've got to find things to do. So I learned from my first detention, you need to, firstly, when they give you food, you take 1 hour to eat it. You make sure you exercise in the morning, even if you're lazy to exercise, but you take your time, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. You ask them for a little bucket so you can clean your cell, so you clean your cell as much as possible, okay? So that every second you must have something to do, walking around, sitting, and not lose control of time. So that's why I was able to note the days I could exercise, and I'm not talking of the exercise I did in the corridor. I'm talking of the exercise that I would do in my cell, okay? The exercise in the corridor was, before they took you for a shower, they would let you walk. So it's the corridor, and the cop, the security branch cop, would stand. It could be McPherson, it could be someone. They would stand at the end and be watching you. They might have someone in the shower as well, but they are watching, and you can't. And even the cell, the steel. There was a steel gate that would lock the shower. Okay, normally, and so they would see you go up and down, and you had to be in their sight. Okay, so that was one form of exercise that's called, where you either ran or you walked up and down.
Thank you, Mr. Wallman. I think you've given us a good insight as to how you came up with your calendar. Now, I want to take you to your evidence in your affidavit where you said that you actually managed to have a discrete interaction with Dr. Aggett, which appeared to take place during the second week of your detention. Can you describe that for us?
Yes. Just by way of context, so when you get taken up, you try and look for every opportunity to find out what do the security police know about our activities. So for example, I think it may even have been on my first day or two. It must have been the first day when I returned from Dr. Jacobson. They took me to the shower, and I found that they didn't lock the gate, and the security branch policeman wasn't there. And I was able to go to Feroz Kachalia's cell, because the outer gate was on, and have literally a 1-minute discussion where basically I got a sense that they didn't really know much about us, okay, beyond the open legal meetings and so on. The same thing happened with Neil Aggett the following Sunday. So the date would be, I suspect, I mean I don't know the exact date, but I suspect it was very early on, so it was the day that, on the 24th of January, that the first day I'm not taken now for interrogation after my detention. And I went to the shower. I must have taken my clothes with, dried myself obviously I suspect, and put on my clothes. And as I was going to my cell, I forgot my towel, so I went back. And then I noticed the security branch policeman was gone. So I saw Neil's outer cell door was open. I went up to his cell. I remember him walking up and down. I think he was much taller than me, appeared tall. I think he was smoking. And as soon as he saw me, he came to the steel grill, and I introduced myself. I should add that every detainee knows every other detainee, because there's a meal book that goes around with your names, and you notice the movements. When you're in detention in solitary, you look for every bit of information that there is, whether it's the meal book, the complaints book, etc. And I obviously knew this was Neil Aggett because there were 3 white detainees. I knew Orette van Heerden, who was there, and I knew Keith Coleman. So obviously from the meal book and so on, I knew this was Neil Aggett. We had a brief chat, I introduced him, I asked him what did he think is happening, what would happen, and he indicated that he didn't think he would be charged. He thinks that they want to use him and all of us, most of us as state witnesses, but he himself as a state witness against Barbara Hogan, Cedric De Beer and Cedric Mason. And the way he said it, it was clear to me that he had no intention to give evidence, okay? That this is what they have us here for. And then it was Constable Chauke, who was watching us. He saw us talk. He obviously saw me. I'm not supposed to be in front of that cell. He saw us talking, reprimanded me. McPherson came and reprimanded us, and so on. Now, normally, they would go and tell their white security bosses what had happened. But sometimes, when there's a lapse like this, when it reflects on them, I suspect they were too scared to tell their bosses, but they made sure that they reprimanded us. So that was the only time that I was able to talk to Neil. He looked reasonably healthy, mentally he was well, and he was fine. And when you're in detention, you always want to talk to someone who is like me, an anti-apartheid activist, even though I didn't know him. So it's what you look out for, and what was a good discussion, and that's why I don't forget those instances, especially in the 2-3 weeks where I'm being detained and I'm looking for information. What do they know about us? What do we tell? What do we know that they already know? So when you tell them, you're telling them nothing. Okay, that sort of thing comes at play.
And while you were chatting at his cell door, did you manage to get a glimpse into his cell? And if so, do you recall how it looked?
Look, his cell looked pretty bare. I mean, I didn't particularly notice anything that struck that a detainee shouldn't have. He would have had his polystyrene cups, a bit of food, which they allowed sometimes, cool drinks or so from the family. So it was bare. If there were things in the cell, I would have been actually surprised. But it was like my cell, bare. There was nothing much there.
Did you see perhaps a kukoi in the cell or on him?
No. I didn't notice that particularly. It was very brief, the amount of time we spent. I mean, we got caught.
Yes, indeed. If we can then move to the initial contact that you had with Dr. Aggett in the second week, and you indicate in your affidavit that he did not look unduly stressed. He seemed to be relaxed. This is from paragraph 62.
Yes.
And perhaps while you're dealing with that, you can then resume your evidence on what you noticed in relation to Dr. Aggett on the weekend of 30th January.
Okay, so I just want to say, so when I spoke to him on the 24th of Jan, he appeared relaxed. He had been through his hard time, and he was not being interrogated. And because I was going through the stress of being interrogated. Of course, little did we know that the following day he would start. And these are not things that you know up front. I mean, every day you hope they don't come for you. When you hear the gate, are they coming for me? Okay? And so they start taking him on that Monday morning and take him every day. Okay? And so we would see each other, I don't remember how many times, but a few times, because as I said, they would, at 7 o'clock or so, they would open the cell of the people they're going to take up. They would give you your breakfast earlier, in your polystyrene cup, and then they would ask you to do if you wanted to do the exercise, and and that's really literally walking 3-4 times up the corridor, okay? And then you had to go and shower. So that they would do still whilst you're in your cells. If they were in a rush, they might have one doing the exercise and one in the shower. And if they were really, really under pressure, they could even have 2 detainees in the shower at the same time, because there were a few showers. And but then they would stand there. But Neil and I don't recall ever being in a shower, having our showers at the same time. So it was always from a distance, he in a corridor or I'm in a corridor and he in a shower. And often then, when we would be taken to the first floor, to be taken out to the 10th floor. And remember, we have escorts, so we each have one or two security policemen come fetch us, they handcuff you, you go to the first floor, because at John Foster, as you would have seen, the cells are in a physically different building from the offices, but they are adjoining. So you go from the first floor, I think there's an entrance to the lift of the main building, and then you're taken up to the 9th floor, and I think then you have to use a stair, something like that, okay? But at that point, and in fact, you know, you make a joke of it, everything is donkey hack, then someone comes and opens the gate, okay, because different people would hold the key. So here there would be an occurrence book, normally would be a white officer, and they would notice when you leave, when you come back, and so on. So that's where I would then have seen Neil on a few occasions. Every time I saw him, like with all detainees, you greet. You don't even, you just say hi, or you wink, or smile. You take your chances and say hi. You can't say any more because the police will definitely report you. But we take our chances with just a brief hi or smile or so, okay? And this happened consistently when I saw him. Very friendly, but we couldn't talk. Okay, couldn't ask him how was it today, what's happening, none of that. Okay. That weekend, I was not taken for questioning, so that's the 30th and the 31st. I think I noticed it. I know Samuel Larumo was next to me. We said, hey, is Neil back? Did he come back at night? Did they bring him? A lot of that weekend, and I think it would be the entire weekend, he was not brought back. So in other words, when he was taken on the 29th, I'm not sure if he ever got back to his cell on the 29th, or if he was brought back, he was taken on the Saturday morning, but he was not brought back maybe even Sunday night, I don't know. But we noticed from the meal book that he hadn't, because they would record when you have meals at least once a day, you're supposed to do it with every meal, you would sign for the meal, that he hadn't signed the meal book. And that was one book, so they would come to your cell. So, you know, we noticed that he wasn't brought back. So by then, it was obvious that Neil was going through now some heavy detention. Interrogation, and it's never pleasant to be on the 10th floor, even if you, because they can always just come and ask you and smack you and beat you up and torture you and keep you awake for the whole night. So he was kept there. So I'm sure they did nasty things to him if he went through such an intensive period. By the following week, do you want me to go on?
You mentioned in your affidavit, paragraph 66, that you did get a glimpse of Dr. Aggett on the 10th floor, and that was on or about the 1st or 2nd of February.
Yes, look, I might have got even glimpses a few times, but the one on the 1st and 5th, so the next week, I'll come to you in a second, because these windows were frosted windows, and you know, you are in one, someone else is a few doors away. Generally you don't see them. You might hear someone screaming because they're beating someone up. Now and then when they allowed you to go to the toilet, they escort you and the door may be open and you might get a glimpse, okay? And I think because he and I were taken, there was a sense that he was there and he would have had a sense that I was somewhere. But definitely the following week, now the 1st to the 4th of February, Neil is clearly under stress. And although I didn't particularly notice it at the time, but now that I think back, yes, he was having difficulty walking at some point in that week. But the thing that stands out, so we get taken on, again, a few mornings, we see each other, but on the 3rd or the 4th, and it's hard for me to remember the exact, sometimes I think it's the 3rd, sometimes the 4th. we are on the first floor to be signed out, and Neil was looking bad, and that was the one day I greet him and he doesn't greet back. Not because he was being unfriendly, certainly not. Neil was like in a daze, like he didn't know what was happening. I mean, he was almost like a zombie, you know, and I was very perturbed, and I saw a big mark on his forehead. Okay, I can't remember right or left now, but it stood out, and I've never forgotten that, ever. Okay, it was a bruise, and it was big, and he didn't have that before. And of course, I just concluded that he had been beaten. You know, maybe they took his head and bashed it or something, and he had a visible injury. And so I was struck that he didn't greet back, he didn't wink, he didn't say hi, nothing. And he was in another world. Okay, he was clearly under pressure. I was so worried that the first opportunity I could, and that could have been that evening or the following evening, if I saw him on the morning of the 3rd, then it would have been the following evening. But the night before Neil died, I spoke to my neighbor Samuel Larumo, because he could come through the cell, or I don't know how, but I said to him, "Hey, did you see Neil? He looks bad. He's going through a tough time," something to that effect. And I said to him, "Did you see the mark on his head?" Because he told me he saw him, that he had been brought back at 3:30 on that Wednesday or Thursday, as I said. I'm not sure which day. But he said to me there was blood on his forehead, okay? I think he meant that there was a bruise, okay? So he and I had kind of seen it. And he too commented on, like, feeling sorry for Neil. He's clearly going through a hard time. And either the following morning or the day after, we hear that Neil is dead. So this we saw before. And I want to add one thing. I didn't say this incident at my inquest, okay? And because we had prepared with the lawyers for the family. I had given evidence. We had prepared an overall document where it is noted. But we're still living under an apartheid state, a very repressive state. We still have to face the security branch. So certainly in my evidence, I didn't mention any other detainee. Because firstly, you're not supposed to talk. Secondly, Larumo was still, I thought, under detention or still in jail, and the security police could get him any time, just like I saw when I complained. In fact, later, some of my other fellow detainees told me new facts which I've got in my affidavit, like Eric Matonga. But in my evidence, none of that was mentioned because we are facing an apartheid inquest. We knew how the court was going to rule. You didn't have to be a genius to know that it would rule against the detainee, and that they would be totally skeptical of everything that we said, and they would just try and knock us down as witnesses. So I did not name in that affidavit other detainees by their name. Obviously now under democracy, I can reveal all of that as well. And so the key point is, Larumo and I spoke. We both saw the mark. We saw he was going through a hard time, and then suddenly, within 24 hours or so, Neil Aggett is dead. Okay.
Can you indicate the means or method you used to communicate with Larumo? Okay,
Larumo, as I think I said earlier, used to shine the floors at the corridor, clean the shower. They would allow him to do that. They had long finished with his interrogation for whatever he was detained for. And so he was the one detainee who could go between cells, and whilst he's cleaning, he would give us a message and tell us something. So either I spoke to him, like by him just been polishing a floor outside my cell or he could come there near the cell and we could talk, we found time to talk, or though the windows were sealed, you couldn't speak to people outside, there might have been a gap between the cells, so that could have been another way. But the other way that we had was a toilet system. Okay, now it wasn't as effective in the big cells, but later, and Jabu Ngwenya was an expert on this, what we would do is we kept our toilets very clean, okay, and we kept those polystyrene, we kept a few, because they were the toilet polystyrenes where, and you'd only do this at night when you could hear that the outer gates were locked, okay, that you then took out the water, and once the level in the toilet goes down, it's like a telephone system if the others do it, and we could have long discussions, okay. Bear in mind, we assume that the cells are bugged. We don't talk about cases, what happened to you, what's happening to someone, or sensitive information. It would be just how you, just general chat. We heard something else is happening in the country because we don't have newspapers. So it would just be anyone has some snippet of information to give to anyone. And you assume that even if the cops know that info, you'd just be in trouble for knowing it, not for that it can be used against someone. So those were the three mechanisms when the security branch police weren't present that you could communicate. And I should say that the toilet communication was useful because that's what keeps your mental sanity. If you are in your cell and you can't talk to anybody, you can go crazy. Okay? You can lose. So just the ability to talk to other human beings is something that's critical. And even if you have to risk being caught by the security branch, the fact that you could talk to others and just talk about general things was something you looked forward to and which kept you mentally healthy.
You mentioned that a few days before Neil Aggett's death, you were able to communicate with a detainee by the name of Eric Mtonga.
Yes.
Can you explain what he told you in relation to Neil Aggett, and also how you were able to talk with Eric Mtonga?
Yes. Look, some of those discussions then happened after Neil's death. And obviously, as the interrogations are over, even the cops were sort of maybe not as strict. So whilst you couldn't talk, but sometimes there might be two of you in a shower, they would be watching, but there's a bit more opportunity to talk. So I don't remember how I talked to him, but obviously every detainee there had some story about Neil Aggett. Okay. His story was that one day when Neil was being escorted by Constable Chauke, who by the way was quite a rabid system supporter. I mean, he was very hostile to us. And Eric told me that he had boasted, see how he's walking. He can't walk, he's limping because we fucked him up, we kicked him in his balls, something to that effect. I don't remember the exact words. Okay. Similarly, I think there were other detainees, Jabu Ngwenya, I remember, saw how he was being treated, may have something to say. I spoke to Red van Heerden. Everyone had some story to say that how I think Red said they're playing cat and mouse with Neil. People had got that info somehow. They might have had some contact with Neil at some point, and before he died, obviously. Unfortunately, people like Eric, who was with Sawu, are no more. And he passed away a few years after I'm not sure if he ever gave evidence. It may have been that they were still in detention. No, he might have been released before me. I'm not sure.
What is your view of the police version that Neil Aggett hanged himself in his cell?
You know, I think that, frankly, you know, it's... Firstly, I'm very clear that Neil Aggett, given the state he was in, given how difficult it is, I would imagine, not that I tried it, to hang yourself. I don't believe Neil hung himself, okay? And as part of that, you know, once they locked the cells on that Thursday, 4th of February, on that 5th, we weren't being taken out. Now, I said I was taken to the doctor, but if I remember, we were not, it was unusual that morning. We were not taken for showers, we were not taken out, and clearly there was something going on. But even when I went to the doctor, I didn't notice anything. I think it's quite easy for them to come if they kill Neil on the 10th floor and then to come and do something. It's quite possible, okay? You wouldn't hear it if they were soft in how they opened cells and cell doors and so on. You know. And
essentially, you're saying that given your last sighting of him, he didn't have the physical capacity to carry out such a maneuver?
When I think of it now, I don't think so. Neil was literally, they had really finished him up. And sorry, what I've omitted to say, Eric also said something like this. Eric, I've told them everything, but they're still fucking me up. I don't know what they want from me. Okay? So this is what Eric said to me, what Neil said to him. So it seems that Eric had seen him around the time of that last week before Neil had died, and when Neil had told him this. So I don't think he could have. I think he was, you know, physically he was not he was not in a good state. Mentally, I think he was under a lot of pressure. So, you know, I don't think so.
Well, you may have been sleeping, but in the late night of 4th February, 1982, early morning of 5th February, did you hear anything in particular going on the second floor?
No. You see, by that the day after Neil died, they moved me away from cell 204 to the inner cells. I think it was 229. So these were smaller cells, and they were sealed with perspex. And in those cells, you know, I remember when I first went there, it's like you can hardly breathe. But okay, after a few hours there, you learn to breathe. But it's literally difficult to hear anything. And, you know, once your outer door is locked, it's like the cell is almost sealed, okay? It's closed, it's hard to hear. So, no, I didn't hear anything, and I was surprised. I mean, you knew something. Why are they taking us out for shower? And they saw as little of us, the warders and so on, as possible. Just gave you food and left and whatever. But as I said, I was even taken to the doctor on that day. It's only when I got back and in the afternoon, somehow word went round. I don't remember that someone had died amongst us, and then, you know, it was Neil. And we then got visits the following day from our parents, which never ever happened under solitary normally. But obviously the government was under pressure to show that we had not been beaten up. So I know that on that Saturday I had a visit from my parents. Brief visit, but taken again to the 10th floor. So no, I didn't hear anything. I didn't, don't know what happened.
The cell that you removed to the day after Neil died, you said had a perspex
Yes.
covering on the grill.
So what they had there was, you would have the grills, but between the grill and yourself, inside, if I remember, there would be perspex. So when you're in a perspex cell, then you can't even reach a bar, presumably to hang yourself. You are completely in a...
And was that cell in those days known as a suicide-proof cell?
Yes, I mean, yes.
Mr. Mamanyat, is anything else you wish to add before we close your evidence?
No, look, I think just to say that, I think that I'm happy that the inquest is taking place, that you have an objective process, because the first one was clearly a sham. That I think that Neil Aggett was, the little I know about him, was a very committed South African activist, that he went through a really rough time, and I think I hold the police responsible. I also want to just say one other point. I mean, I think, because I've looked at social media, I continue to have the highest respect for Barbara Hogan. Okay, I think that Barbara is a phenomenal South African, and yes, mistakes are made during any struggle, and some of us ended up in jail, and in Neil's case he ended up having died. But in a sense, as political activists, we kind of understood that being detained and possibly even dying was possible when you got involved in the struggle. And I think that I just wanted to express for both Neil and Barbara, I think that I regard them as the best of South Africans, and you certainly didn't give in to the system, and they fought apartheid and are fighting apartheid right to the end. So I think that legacy is important just to note.
No further questions, my lord.
Thank you, madam. You testified, sir, that you were interrogated by the white security branch officers. Did the Indians, colored or blacks ever interrogate you?
So generally your interrogation was only white security branch. There were at that time black African and colored security branch, but yeah, they were just used to escort us up and down or take us to the doctor, not really part of the interrogation. In my first interrogation, which was in 1980, there was even then there was some Indian and I think Harry Prasad and what was his name, Peterson, who were around. But even then, it was only really the white Major Haystack at that point that would interrogate you. These guys were, and in fact, a feature of these police was that they, of black security policemen, and I use it in a broad sense, colored, Indian, African, I mean, they were just trying to always please their white bosses. And in fact, they would want to show them that they were treating you badly, okay? But they would not be trusted. They were still not just second or third class citizens. And to the point, I should add that you could be a captain in the police, like Captain Sands, okay? And you could be told by a white constable security policeman to go and buy food, okay, which often happened whilst they were there. And that's what they would do, go and buy food for the white security policemen.
And they would comply.
And they would comply. course, we regarded them as sellouts and as, as agents of apartheid.
Yeah. And was there any time that they made tea for you, the security branch officers, on the 10th floor?
You know, when you are interrogated, you don't really feel like eating. If they bring something, it's not like you can ask for tea.
Yeah.
There's water, you have it. You try and minimize going to the toilet because everything is used against you. They may say no, and then you really have to go.
Yeah.
If you don't watch it, then you may have to do it right then and there, which is what they would enjoy. So I was taken once or twice to the toilet, but it's not like you order tea or that, no. If they bring it, you might consider having it, but you're also careful. Are they poisoning you? Are they giving you something? So you try and not drink more than you have to. And I don't recall your food actually being given to you there, because the food was in the cells, and if you didn't get fed, by the time you went back, you would find the food is still there in your cell.
And if you were kept overnight, would they bring your food upstairs?
I was never kept overnight myself, so I don't know, but I have my doubts. The security police don't come to, the white security policemen, they would come now and then, but they would rarely, it was rare, that they would actually come to your cell to fetch you and so on. If it was a white policeman, it was someone quite junior, and that used to happen.
I see. And was there a time when they gave you fruit or anything from their own pocket?
No.
And you were informed by Malena colleague that Fenter applied for amnesty for what he did to you. During that amnesty hearing, were you ever approached about what is alleged to have been done by you, to you by Fenter and his company?
I don't think so. It's the first time I heard today that Fenter had asked for amnesty. I wasn't aware of it, so probably not. It's a long time ago now we're talking about.
Yeah. But you never appeared before the amnesty?
No, I did not.
The TRC yourself?
I did not.
And has Fenter ever apologized to you?
No. I've never seen him after that, after I was released. So.
Do you know that he's still alive?
Well, I heard through this case, yes, that he's still alive.
And was there any time when you were asked to drink a liquid that left you dazed or confused?
No, not that I can think of.
No, that you Did you know a person by the name of Warrant Officer Billy Cox?
No.
Was he not? You don't remember him interrogating you?
No. But look, I didn't know the names of all the police that interrogated me.
Yeah.
In my affidavit I mentioned, I know the others were Deercliff's. I had some interaction, and he was seemingly always smiling. But the day I was being released, he wanted to question me. He played psychological games. That's the sense I got about Deercliff's. I know there was a guy, Abri, who was maybe a railway policeman, who was quite brutal as well. But fortunately, I didn't have any interaction with him.
Yeah. Did he do anything to you?
No, he would come in and also read the statement, but he would play good cop with me. And you could see a smart cop. So you would look for the contradictions and so on. But he didn't beat me up or anything.
Yes. And when you were beaten up, was this done discreetly or openly in the presence of, let's say, the black police officers?
Look, the black police officers, look, firstly, the security branch did what they did openly in their offices. They weren't going to get demoted for beating you up. They were going to get promoted, in fact, probably. Okay. And in fact, they tried to almost outdo each other sometimes. So that was done openly. The black security police would see you being beaten up, but they wouldn't be in the room. They would, if they came to the 10th floor after they left you, they might be asked to sit in another office, or when the white police officers went somewhere, they would ask them to sit in a room with you. So they were sort of around. And given the frosted windows, you saw people being beaten up, or people. You heard people screaming and so on. And I had heard people screaming, but I don't remember it specifically. It was almost like normal, okay. But I don't think too many people were being questioned in how. I mean, in the case that I'm in, clearly Neil, myself, we were all around the Barbara Hogan case. There were other detainees for other cases who would be brought up, beaten up, I mean, I remember even in our cells, there were 2 young Indian kids who came, and there were quite a few young African kids also who came in now and then. But when Neil died, there were these 2 Indian, may have been at school. I think one's name was Salim Badat and one Ashraf, and they were actually there when Neil died. So, but I don't hear anything of them. They weren't very political themselves, and they were released at some point.
And you told us that one of the officers told you about Ahmed Timon. What did he say about him? And,
this would be general, and not even then. Any detention you went, I guess if you were Indian, they made sure they'll say Ahmed Timon. Maybe they might even say Steve Biko, or they always reminded you of people they had killed. Because one, they were proud of it.
Yeah.
2, they knew that would induce real fear. And 3, and of course we all knew it, that they had died. And so, comments about flying Indians and this and that, slipping on a bar of soap, they joked about it generally.
Yeah. You wouldn't know or remember who talked about it?
No, it was so widespread, that kind of talk. It was like they talk generally.
And in your mind, why would they tell you about Ahmed Timon also?
Well, they want to tell you that we killed Ahmed Timon. They were also very racist, so they would see me as an Indian, not as a South African first. And they would say, it happened to him and you'll be the next one. Okay. So it was a threat all the time.
That's right. And you informed us that you informed Dr. Jacobson of your assaults.
Yes.
When you did that, was there any police officer in that office?
No.
It was only the 2.
Just the doctor. But look, we always saw everyone as a possible agent of the system. They're not going to take you to a doctor who's really sympathetic.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's more about reporting this, so that if and when you charge, you could at least try and recall that evidence. Also, I guess after the way the doctors that dealt with Steve Biko and the pressure they were under, the doctors would try and pretend to us, that they were doing the right job and so on. And I'm not saying that they were necessarily would report, like, they might not have liked what would happen, maybe, but they felt compelled to tell the security police, because if they didn't, they would feel that they themselves would get into trouble. Now, being a public servant, I can understand that, okay? That people feel that you need to say that. Okay? But we factored, many of us more experienced would factor that in, that anything you say to anyone in the system, the info would get to the security branch, and the security branch would then use that info. And I want to make the point, they induce extreme fear. So even though I might say that I got off, compared to others, who had much heavier doses of interrogation, you still lived with fear every minute. You didn't know what was going to happen. You always knew that they could become brutal and do what they did to Ahmed Timol or other detainees who had a rough time, that they would do that. They were capable of that. And even whether you went to the district surgeon or magistrate, under the apartheid law, none of those institutions were independent, like today. Yeah. Okay, if you're a doctor or you're a chartered accountant, you have certain standards. Okay, there's certain levels of confidentiality that apply. Okay, under apartheid, that wasn't the case, in the sense that the state and apartheid, they had the right to get any and every bit of information.
Yes. And when you complained to the doctor about your assault, you told us that you didn't mention any name of any police officer.
Yes, I generally did not want to mention names of people, because if you did, there would be repercussions. I mean, so on the one hand, not that I knew the day I went to Dr. Jacobson that Dr. Aggett had died, but certainly once I knew, we became a bit braver on just stating it.
And so it must have amazed you or taken you aback that the very same people that were assaulting you are the ones that are asking you about the statement that you made to the doctor.
No, I wasn't surprised. I almost expected it. So, yes, they know. So it just confirms that whatever you tell anyone gets back to the security branch. Okay, we should call them SB, security branch, right? And, but, they push to retract the entire statement. But, I made sure that thereafter I saw Sergeant Blom or then or before, whenever, or the inspector, that there's a consistent story. I didn't expect, by the way the system worked was, even if I was charged and I put that, I'm actually surprised it came out in the public domain. Because normally even those professionals or others would deny that you told them that. I mean, it's only you and them. Yeah.
When they asked you to retract your statement that you made, was it the statement that you made to Blom or the statement that you made to the doctor?
I think the statement to the doctor and then the statement to the magistrate. So they wanted a piece of paper to say, I had told lies, blah, 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 I guess, or they didn't do it. So they could, but the point is this, you're doing all of this under duress.
Yeah.
You're not a free player. Your lawyer is not there to guide you. Okay. So, frankly, any of the evidence that they have, actually, unless the detainee voluntarily says, no, this is true, frankly, is under duress. If I had it, I wouldn't give them any statement. I would just have reported charges. I would have said, I want to see the police and they charges. You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
There's apartheid. In fact, they'd think you're mad if you said that. They just beat you up and, that's it.
That's it. And to Sergeant Blom, did you mention names?
No. To none of them did I mention names. And as I said, as soon as I spoke to her, she went to, I caught a glimpse of her going to Cronright's office.
Oh, you saw her going to Cronright's office?
Yes. All of them, and not just them, but the detainees, when they felt they wanted something, the mayor, you know. Cronwright was clearly in charge in everything he would say. So, sorry, the one thing I forgot actually to say, in fact, Cronwright, one day whilst I was sitting, he came to me to say he's got proof that the anti-SAIC campaign was an ANC front. And he bought a copy of a South African Communist Party publication. I think he brought African Communists. And there was an article on the outcome of on the South African Union Council our campaign against. And he made me read the whole article and then to confess and wanted me to confess that this was proof that we were told by Lusaka or outside what to do. You know, needless to say, we didn't need anyone to tell us to oppose apartheid. We opposed apartheid because we saw it was discriminatory, that it was infringing on human rights, and nobody had to tell us to oppose the South African Union Council. Yes. We opposed it because we knew that was the right thing to do.
Yes. And did Sergeant Blom inform you of her rank, what her rank was?
Well, she was a sergeant.
She was a sergeant. She told you?
Yeah, she gave a name and so on, so that's how I knew her name.
Yeah.
But she also said that she was an independent channel to the Minister of Finance. Sorry, Minister of Finance, I'm the boss. Minister of Justice, okay?
The President Minister.
Yes.
Yes. And did she tell you what her problem was being a sergeant and taking a statement from you? For instance, did he tell you that she's not able to investigate this matter because you are making allegations against the special branch police officers?
She may have, but largely she just took the statement, and it seemed to me she took a statement because I had made a complaint.
Yeah.
But she said that this was, as I said, an independent to the Minister of Justice, who will then act appropriately. Okay. Of course, I didn't buy any of that nonsense. I mean, Minister of Justice at the time was a Minister of Injustice, if anything.
I see. Marat, I see the time is 1 o'clock.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Will you convene at 2?
As a practice, thank you.
All right.